few minutes, but brings a crowd with him. And I know many of you are fans of the show When Calls the Heart, or the other works that Brian has done, movies like The Case for Christ, and really, really excited for you to get to hear from him today. If this is your first time here, I want to give you just a special welcome. My name is Brian Schulenberg. I'm the outreach pastor here at Wooddale Church. I run something called the Family Resource Initiative here, which is what our Lunch and Learns come out of. Every single Thursday, we have a Lunch and Learn, and every week, those Lunch and Learns are about diverse topics. And so today, you get to hear from a Hollywood star. Last week, we had a therapist who was here and was talking about how do you deal with trauma in your life. And so, and next week, we've got a baseball card influencer coming here because it's the Twin Cities Sports Card Show next week. 100,000 people will be coming into town for that next weekend. And he's going to be here, and we have a big trade night that night. But it is always fun. I want to let you know what's coming up the next few weeks on our Lunch and Learns. So again, next week is Ty Wilson. And then the week after that, or 2 weeks after that, Brian Anderson will be with us. Brian grew up here at Wooddale Church. His dad was the pastor of Wooddale Church for over 37 years, Leith Anderson. And Brian runs an organization in the Twin Cities called Hope Kids. And it's an organization that comes alongside terminally ill children and their parents at just a really difficult time, but provides hope and healing and memories for those families that are just treasured. And the work that he does is tremendous. I want to encourage you to come out. That'll be on April 24th, and we can't wait to have you with us. Well, our speaker today is somebody who has made an impact in the arena of TV and film for decades. Probably the most important thing about our speaker today is that he was the high school classmate of my office mate, Dan Carlson. And so Brian can tell you some stories later on today, if you want, about Dan Carlson that Dan's wife doesn't even know. But with 35 years of experience in Hollywood film and television industry, Brian has made it his mission to create life-affirming, redemptive stories that inspire and uplift. And if you've paid attention to the landscape in Hollywood, you know that that is a rare deal to have somebody like that. He is the co-founder of Believe Pictures with a guy named Michael Landon Jr. Many of you grew up watching Michael Landon Sr. on a television show as you were growing up. The Illinois native specializes in film and television projects that explore themes of faith, love, and transformation. He has written and produced and executive produced a wide variety of impactful works, including The Case for Christ, a film that came out in 2017, Captive, the ultimate life in the heart of man. Brian's known for his role as the executive producer and co-creator of the television show When Calls the Heart, which is on the Hallmark Channel on Sunday nights. They just finished up season 12, and in his introduction to us last week, encouraging you to come via video, he spilled the beans that season 13 is coming. What you may not know is that When Calls the Heart is the #1 television show on cable TV outside of like the news, all right? So that is a big, big deal, all right? We are really, really blessed to have Brian, and he's going to be sharing today some of the miracle of kind of the story of how that happened. What didn't come in your bio, so I had to dig deep on IMDb, is he's also the creator of McGee and Me. If you grew up in that world, that is a great, great show. And Step by Step with Suzanne Summers and Patrick Duffy, all right, that great TV show from back in the day. And so a great career. And as always, at the end of Brian's presentation, we'll have some time for Q&A. If you're new to us and you don't like microphones, I'm sorry, we will bring the microphone to you because there are so many people who are watching online who will want to hear what your question is when you have a question for Brian. And so don't be too timid when I bring that microphone to you at the end of today. Brian asked if we would play a clip before he came up today to speak, because not everybody here has watched When Calls the Heart. And so we're going to show you about a 5-minute clip, and for those of you who are Hearties, that is a thing, all right? That is like fans of the show When Calls the Heart. For those of you who are Hearties, you're going to recognize some of this from the early seasons of When Calls the Heart. So with no further ado, check out the video, and then Brian will be up to speak.
Send thy Holy Spirit to comfort and strengthen us, that we may have hope of life eternal and trust in your goodness and mercy.
And every a story of a broken heart.
I know he wrote it for me.
There is a story of
It's okay.
a victorious God.
There's one more thing that you and I need to do.
There is a silent voice, a heart undone.
Rosaline!
But there is a song of hope from God of love. And look what you've done for me.
Rosaline?
My sins are gone and I am free.
Mommy!
You have overcome. You have overcome.
They found her!
You have overcome. You're the light of the world. Oh. Darkness must go away.
Is this some kind of joke?
No joke, Mr. Gowan.
Light has gone.
You need workers. We need roofs over our children's heads.
And all of our shame must break. For God is here. Oh, and look what you've done for me. I stand right now in victory. You have overcome.
What is it? I'm no longer a wife. I'm no longer a mother. I'm just struggling to find my purpose now.
This town will never support a cafe. And if Coal Valley were ready for another eatery, I would have opened it myself.
I sure hope you have more,
Why?
because you're gonna need them.
You're the light of the world. Let my feet run a little bit faster, and let my mouth sing.
I didn't have a home.
I'm guessing you don't have a mom or a dad either, do you?
Let my heart surrender, surrender to Jesus. Yeah, come on, make it your own. Come on. And let my feet run.
Please don't let go. I'm afraid I have to.
No, you don't. This is where he belongs.
You came back to Hope Valley because this is your home. And the people here are your family. You're not a criminal.
I earned that reputation, Abigail.
Well, as of today, you're earning a different one. Thank you for believing in our town. There is a lot to believe in. I know that this is hard for you to understand, but you have to have faith. You have to know in your heart that God is watching over you. And no matter what happens, he has a plan for you, even if you don't know what that plan is. Elizabeth, you're gonna have a baby.
You're the light of the world.
Well, thank you for having me today. I'm always honored to come talk about what I do, talk about the origin story of When Calls the Heart, answer questions, give spoilers out for people waiting for the next season. But I want to tell the story today about how this all began. And it's quite a harrowing journey. But before I do that, just want to thank Dan for inviting me, my buddy from 50 years ago. My 50th high school reunion's coming up later this year, and Dan was just like a year behind me at the same high school. And Dan, I don't know if you remember a guy named Brian Alba. So when I went to my 25th reunion, high school reunion, I saw this guy who looked very familiar, Brian Alba, who I knew from the school newspaper. And I was the senior editor of the school newspaper. Brian was one of the other editors, and we sort of both got our start in journalism. And so when I saw Brian at this reunion, he had a fur coat on, and he had a couple of, very attractive ladies on his arms. And I thought, that's interesting, and both kind of journalist guys. And so I went up and greeted him. I said, "It's great to see you." He asked me about what I did and how my career went from journalism. I was a newspaper reporter early in my career, morphed into writing for film and TV. And then I asked him what he did, and he goes, "Yeah, I'm still in journalism. I'm an editor at a magazine." And I said, "Well, I've been working on things like, Touched by an Angel and family programming, films of faith and so forth." And I said, what magazine do you edit? He goes, Hustler magazine. And I thought, okay then, nice to see you again. It was like, wow, our lives went completely in different directions. So anyway, so you wanted a high school story, now you have that one that you can share. Anyway, yeah. So what you saw there is just an appetizer of what the show is. And that represents, honestly, only about the first 5 years, but it's such a powerful little 5-minute sequence that I always try to share it because it gives you a sense of what the show is. And Michael Landon Jr., obviously you know that name, you know his father's name for sure. Those of you who, at least are children of the 60s or the 50s or the 70s, you would recognize that name. So, Michael and I were both not editors for Hustler magazine, but we were working in, more wholesome kinds of content. And so what you just saw there, that 5-minute sequence that you just saw, is now going to be 13 seasons of a show that people have really responded to, but it almost never happened. In fact, there was one chance meeting in a parking lot away from never, ever happening. Now, I'll tell you about that chance meeting in a parking lot a little later. I gave this same talk about 7 years ago because this story is a story that anybody who works in any kind of media work, it sends chills. It gives them goose flesh because of what we experienced. And I gave this same talk 7 years ago at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention. And I was the warm-up speaker for the keynote speaker. I came on right before the keynote speaker, and the keynote speaker was Vice President Mike Pence. And so we had to go through security. We had to go. There was literally a SWAT unit there. There were people on the roof with machine guns. It was crazy, and he got there early, and I was not finished with my talk. But if you know anything about the way presidential events work or vice presidential events, you are finished. If the keynote is there and it's him, you're done, basically. So I was, this same talk that I'm going to give you, they didn't hear the whole thing. I didn't get to the best part before I got tapped on the shoulder and, by somebody who said, you're done now. And I thanked everyone, and I said, if we can do a part 2 someday, that would be awesome, but there's obviously somebody more important than me here, so I have to go. Bye. And I turned around and walked past Vice President Mike Pence, who was being led onto the stage at that second. So I was in rarefied air, but you guys are not in rarefied air here. I'm just one of you. I'm just a fellow traveler on the road of life, trying to keep showing up and doing good work and being there for people. But I wanted to give you that little teaser there about Mike Pence, because you're going to hear the whole story today. He got gypped out of it, but you're not going to. It's an untold story, mostly. I mean, I've told it a few times. But I mostly don't get asked to tell this story, but I always love telling the story. Unbelievably, we're preparing season 13 right now. The writer's room is back together working on scripts for season 13 of One Calls a Heart. 2 weeks ago, season 12 wrapped. The finale was seen by 6.1 million people. And we got a report this year from a big data company called Parrot Analytics. And ever since sort of the explosion of streamers and, back when some of us older folks were growing up, there was 3 channels, right? 3 national channels and a bunch of local stations in every market. Now there's 100 different providers or more. People making original content, streamers, cable channels. The big 4 networks now are dwarfed by the rest of all of that. So how you measure the success of the shows and the content that is happening now is different than when the Nielsen's had a box in 2,000 homes across America, and they gave ratings, the TV ratings from those little boxes. Now everybody has a box. If you have a DVR, you have a box. They know exactly what you're watching and when you're watching. So the research is like a matrix now, going into the matrix. Parrot Analytics is one of the new big companies that is measuring audience data for Netflix, for Amazon Prime, for some of the big streamers. And they released a report this year about One Calls the Heart. I don't know where it came from. I don't know who ordered it, but they released a report that we saw. And it said that One Calls the Heart is 23 times more in demand than other television programs. 23 times. And that it ranks in the top 3% of all television for viewer demand. That's not us, guys. We're just the messengers, but the message is coming from somewhere else. And the message is going out to people like you who are hungry for that message. We just so happen to be in the chairs doing that work. But God brought this wave. And when I tell you the whole story of how it happened, I think you're going to realize that God can use anybody. If He's using me, He can use anybody to do amazing things. And He wants to use anybody to do amazing things. Now, who here has watched One Calls the Heart? And it's okay if okay, a hand, yeah, Probably about a third of you have seen the show. Okay. Well, I'm hoping all of you will go look at it now, right? That's part of why I come and do these things, because I want to share the journey with everybody. But my understanding now is that there are people binging this, right? Some raised hands there. Well, you know the movie I Can Only Imagine and Jesus Revolution? Have you seen those films? Well, my friend who made those movies, John Irwin, called me a few years ago, and he said, this is literally what he said. What have you been doing with my wife? And I hemmed and hawed and said, John, I have no idea what you're talking about, brother. And he goes, she's been locked in the TV room for 3 days. We're hungry. Like my children are hungry, and she won't come out because she's binging your stupid TV show. So I hope I haven't caused hunger, for some of your families, you men whose wives have not been feeding them. But anyway, it's been a quite a journey. Look, you're not all in the film and TV business. You're curious. You work in other lines of work, most of you. All businesses are hard to get off the ground. I'm not saying anything you all don't realize or know. We've all poured our hearts and our blood, sweat, and tears and put them into our work to try to add excellence to make them go. And in my business, film and TV, I've talked to hundreds of other professionals who work in my business and heard all their stories of heartache and heartbreak and the challenge of trying to make things possible in an impossible business that we work in. And I know for you, every project is impossible, right? When you start, it's impossible until it's not, right? Because you've worked hard to get it there. And I know the soul-numbing grind it can be, because I've been through all of that. The endless search for funds, business funds. The endless search for champions to believe in your dreams. The devastating near misses when you thought you were going to be there. You thought it was going to work, and it didn't. And all of the paperwork, the god-awful paperwork and restrictions and permits and legal stuff you have to do, it's just mind-numbing. And all we want to do is build something. Like build something good that people could use and want, right? But you have to go through a minefield to get to the finish line. So my business is not the only business where I know how hard it is, right? No matter how big or small your business, your film, your book, your play, your whatever you're working on, they're all big. Every one of them is big. And we're all in the same boat. It's the great equalizer. Life is the great equalizer for all of us. Last time I checked, the mortality rate is 100%. We're all going to be in a hospital. We're all going to end up in a box, or at least our shells will end up in a box. So life is the great equalizer for all of us, no matter what we do. And so I hope this little journey into my world this morning will help encourage you in your context with what you're doing. So let me tell you the story of the meltdown of One Calls the Heart. Yeah, we just talked about season 13, but I'm going to tell you about the meltdown of One Calls the Heart. It begins in 2007, and a best-selling novel by Jeanette Oak. Some of you know that name. Michael and I had already made another series of films based on some other best-selling fiction by that point. And we were approached by a major production company to make a movie called When Calls the Heart, a prairie romance about a wealthy young school teacher from a big city in the East who follows her heart and calling to the western frontier to teach children in a small town, and finds herself falling in love with a handsome Mountie. That's what the book is, right? The novel was full of faith and woven through with all the great virtues that we all believe in. Virtues of Western civilization, but also the virtues in Scripture. The money and the players were real, but the opportunity turned out literally to be too good to be true. But we didn't find that out until we were already in the middle of it. September of 2008. Who remembers that particular month? 2008, September. Remember what happened? The whole world was on fire. All the money was on fire. Remember, this is when President Bush had to go into a closed-door meeting with all the great bankers and investors and say, guys, we're on the brink of a collapse of the entire world economy. You remember that? Well, guess what? We were in the middle of making the movie When Calls the Heart when that happened. We had already shot 11 days of a $4.5 million movie, right, in Alberta, Canada, where we were filming, and the money melted down. In fact, wires weren't even going. Like, nobody was even allowing wires to travel back then. So we were left holding a bag of unmet payment to actors, to vendors, to crew, right? When you make a movie, you're a week or so, you work a week ahead of payroll, right? So we're out about a week and a half with payroll that was owing from a week and a half ago. Does that make sense? To vendors, to crew, and so forth. We had already spent about $1.5 million on the movie, and we owed about $1.5 million by that point. Michael and I, it wasn't our money. It was coming from California, investment money that was coming in. And it just stopped. And we had to stop. You don't do that in business. It would be much better to have it crash before you start when you don't owe money, right? But it wasn't our money. Our names were on the company. So all of a sudden, we were left holding the bag for about $1.5 million that was owing. We had to fire everybody, close up shop, get on a plane, run home to the U.S., right? But that wasn't the only thing. I had been working on that project for about a year, and I had about a year's worth of pay that I didn't get. Now, there's not too many people that, like, if they have a year's worth of payments, that literally just disappears, because when you're producing something, like, you're the last person to be paid. If you have other people that are owed money, you're never getting your money. Well, I came home with my tail between my legs. My wife picked me up at the airport. She took me to a lawyer. Like, before we even went home, I had to go see a lawyer to try to protect ourselves from all the people that were going to come clamoring for their money. We didn't have it. That's not something we just had in the bank that we could have dealt with. It's a widowmaker. You know that term? Like a widowmaker heart attack, that a man or woman, goes from fully alive to gone in 2 seconds. That's a widowmaker in my business. That's a widowmaker heart attack, right, that happens to a project. And a movie that's half done or a third done is not anything. It's like nothing. It's film sitting on a shelf collecting dust. You can't do anything with it. It's not a full movie, so it has no value. It's just part of a movie. It's like worth nothing. So not only did we have all that hard work go up in flames and money go up in flames, we're sitting on a half-finished movie that we truly believed God had called us to do. What do you do with that? How do you go forward? Owing money to people, having no income, and a half-finished movie that's just sitting there mocking you, right? Making you feel like a failure. So I get home. Just scratch my head saying, okay, now what? So at the time, I was a member of Saddleback Church. Christine, we know each other from those days. I called my posse in, my men posse, my guys. Some of them were on staff at the church, but they were my boys. I said, guys, I have no clue. I have no clue what I'm supposed to do. I'm a pretty good problem solver, but I don't have any fix for this. This is way above my pay grade. And so the guys, we prayed. They surrounded me. They said, look, take 30 days to get some perspective. Because at this point, it just feels like the people that bailed on us, the money, it just feels like lies and deceit circling you. And you don't know what to hang on to. You don't know what's true. So my boys said, no, you have to get alone, bring your Bible, and you write down all the promises in Scripture. You got to write them down, journal them. And remember that we're all here. Nothing's changed about that. Your wife and family, they're there. Nothing's changed about that. Your skills, nothing's changed about your skills. Your skills are still there. So, and nothing's changed about the promises in Scripture. None of that has changed. So you got to get some perspective. And so I did. And I got some perspective. And Michael and I kind of, put our brains together after that, and we said, well, what are we going to do? We had two choices. We could walk away from the original film and start over and permanently have our names on the you-know-what list up in Alberta with all the unions and the businesses, the vendors and the crews and so forth. Or we could try to finish the original film some way, somehow, which would be the only way to activate about $1 million in incentives that had already been earned. So up in Canada, they're famous for, giving you some of your money back because you're employing all their actors, all of their crew. You're spending money in hotels and on services, and so you get a piece of that back. Many states do this now as well. So we had about $1 million just sitting there, grandfathered in from the original production. But the only way we could access that was to finish somehow, some way. And for the next 4 years, we had one near miss after another. Somebody came along like, hey, we like what you're doing, let us help champion you. We know where we can go find some money. Nobody ever has their own money. They know where to go find money, right? It's like the song and dance gets really old. You all know what I'm talking about. So we had all these near misses. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we had this chance encounter in a parking lot at Jerry's Deli in the San Fernando Valley with a guy named Brad Cravoy. Now, Brad, his big claim to fame is he was the producer of Dumb and Dumber. And we were pretty much Dumb and Dumber, Michael and I. So we told him our sob story about what happened. and how it all melted down and how it was just like I thought, for me personally, okay, well, that's the end of my career. I guess I'm going to do something else now. After 25 years at that point of having a fairly successful career, I can't do this anymore. But Brad said, why didn't you guys find me earlier? I eat these kind of salvage operations for lunch. I love these kind of projects. Rescuing something that's half finished or seems like an albatross, let's go figure out how to do it. So we took those 11 days of footage and edited them into a reel, about 45 minutes worth of material. And it was beautiful. Had really good actors in it, and it was gorgeous, shot it up in Alberta. And we went into the Hallmark Channel with Brad Cravoy, kind of partnering with us. And we showed it to them. They said, this is fantastic. They loved it. And they said, can you finish this for $1 million in Romania? And, and your normal reaction is, no, it's a $4.5 million film. We only spent like half of it. So how do we do that? But we just saluted after 4 years. We just said, yes, sir, how high do you want us to jump? We didn't know what it meant, but Romania is known for making content at about half price because the labor is so reasonable there. Or I should say, so cheap there. So we said, yes, let's go for it, right? Now, in the 4 years that had been sitting on the shelf, all those kid actors from the movie now had beards, and the girls had another B word, developing there. And so fortunately we had sort of filmed the whole middle of the movie. We hadn't filmed the beginning act or the last act. And so we thought, okay, well, we got at least those kids are all filmed. But then we approached our main actors, Stephen Amell and Maggie Grace, and they were gracious to us. They said, oh, we wish we could. We would love to, but we're booked for years, already committed to other things. And so that really was, to us, the final nail on the head, in the coffin. All right, well, we can't make a movie without them, right? So Michael called me, we sat on that for a few days, and we didn't tell Brad because we we wanted to figure out if there was some way to make this work, and Michael called me and he said, ship in a bottle. And I said, I don't understand. Ship in a bottle? You mean like somebody finds a bottle that has a little model ship in it, like that? And he goes, yeah, kind of. He said, think of it like a journal. Somebody's journal. Like all those memories in that bottle, but they're in a journal. And I said, you mean a journal with like 11 days of film in them? Flashbacks? He goes, yes. What if it's now 20 years later? And the beautiful woman, Maggie Grace, who played Elizabeth Thatcher, her name is now Aunt Elizabeth Thatcher. And she has a niece, also a namesake niece named Elizabeth Thatcher. But it's 20 years later. And this Elizabeth, also from a wealthy family back east, also wants to be a teacher and follow in the footsteps of her aunt, who went out west and pioneered teaching. And all that beautiful 45 minutes is in the journal. And so young Elizabeth finds the journal and starts to read those stories that her aunt lived through. And all of a sudden, we're thinking maybe it could work. We hire new actors to play the new Mountie and the new teacher in the 20 years later. And then I said, this is going to be so lame. Nobody's going to buy this. They're going to know that this is some kind of a salvage operation, some kind of a patch-up job that we're doing, right? It's so obvious what we're trying to do. And we took that idea to Brad. We took it to the Hallmark Channel, and they go, you know what? It's unconventional, but let's give it a shot. So we did. We went to Romania. We shot for 11 more days in Romania and matched production with Alberta of the Western sort of setting. And we cut it together and gave it to Hallmark Channel. They tested it. They had a focus group watch it, and they liked it. They loved the multi-generational aspect of the storytelling. And we're just going, great, that's awesome. That's what we were hoping you would get out of this. It's what we intended from the beginning. And then it aired. And it got really good numbers on the Hallmark Channel. And they said, we're thinking about getting into the series business, the 1-hour series business. We've only been doing movies up to now, but would you guys want to do 6 episodes of this? And again, we just saluted and said, how high do we need to jump? And that 6 episodes turned into 12 that first season. And now we're getting ready to shoot season 13. So let me tell you about the recovery. Those first season of episodes we shot in Vancouver in 2013. And it began airing in January 11th, 2014. And we discovered the Field of Dreams principle. You remember this line from Field of Dreams? If you build it, they'll come. Well, we discovered that was true. And what we realized is we were making food for starving people. Now, I don't know how much television you guys all watch, probably some, but not a lot, because mostly people are feeding us a diet of cynicism, of vampires, zombies, corrupt cops, corrupt politicians, lawyers, doctors, very cynical. It fosters paranoia in us. It fosters cynical thinking in us. You need a shower after you watch an hour of television sometimes, right? Because it's like, it makes you feel bad. Most everywhere across television right now, people are feeding us a diet of broken glass and razor blades. And when you eat razor blades and broken glass, it tears you up inside. No wonder the country and the culture is at each other's throats. And we're so polarized. We can't trust anybody. There's no sense of community. It drives a wedge in you when you watch this stuff. Now, I'm not saying it's not really well made. I watch a lot of what the competition is doing. It's beautifully done, but it comes, out of off the tongue comes the heart, right? The verse about if that's the worldview of those people making that content, and it is, right? It's deeply cynical. It's devoid. It's Nietzsche's void. You draw back the curtain, and all there is in there is, behind the curtain is a giant black void. And we stare into the void, and the void stares back at us. It's scientific materialism. It's atheism. That's the worldview most of that content is coming from, right? So, but our culture is full of people who are starved to death for something different than that. Back when a lot of us were growing up, we could watch television with our families, right? And we did. There wasn't 10 TVs in a house like there is now, or devices where everybody's off in their own little silo watching their own stuff. Families sat together and watched the show, and then they talked about it afterwards. That's gone. Think about that. That's gone. But When Calls the Heart became the antidote for that. Now, we were just trying to make a good show. We were just trying to survive, like get this thing done because we believed we were supposed to. But what we realized is that we were providing soul food and everybody else is providing razor blades and broken glass. And this flock, this throng of, who's a Hardy in here? Who identifies as a Hardy? Okay, a few of you. Again, the rest of you need to join them, right? We didn't name them. They named themselves on social media and started talking to us. They call themselves Hardys, #Hardys on social media, and started talking to us. We didn't make them up. We didn't hire a company, marketing firm to build that movement. It was purely grassroots. That was from God. That was not because of us. God sent that wave. So the calculus is very easy to understand. If you're living on a big island with a bunch of other people and you're starving for food, and if somebody arrives with food, you will love them. Do you see what I'm saying? There's no data. There's no metrics in that. If you give somebody something that they love, they will love you back. That's what the Hardys did. We were giving them something that they couldn't find anywhere else. Again, not because we were geniuses, but because God sent the wave to us. And now some of you may be familiar, there's hundreds of pages, fan pages on social media, on Facebook and Instagram and now X, formerly Twitter, and what is that, Pinterest, and something called Pentagram, I think. I don't know, is it Pentagram? No, there's nothing called Pentagram. That's called TikTok. Sorry. Little inside humor there. Hardys meet weekly all over the country in cities and towns, not just in America, by the way. This is happening in South America, in Europe, in Canada, in Asia. They meet weekly for Hardy's parties. Nearly 10,000 of them have paid their own way to get to Vancouver, where we filmed the show over these years, for 8 what we call Hardy's family reunions. And it's really Comic-Con, a little mini Comic-Con, but just for our show. And up to 500 of them come every year. They pay their own way to get there. They meet in a hotel. They stay in a hotel. We have a big ballroom that we fill with Hardys. We bring our cast in for panel discussions and interaction with Hardys. And then the next day, we bus them all out to Hope Valley. And they get to wander around Hope Valley and take millions of pictures that all show up on social media, right? So we fed the Hardys. We were smart enough to at least talk back to them. We didn't know what to do about it at the beginning. I saw it and I said, hey guys, these people are talking to us. What are we supposed to do? And we were just smart enough to know that we should talk back to them, right? And fuel the relationship. And then we got our actors talking back to them on social media. And the Hallmark Channel was smart enough to put #Hardys in the lower third of the screen during the show. when it aired that first season. And it just started to mushroom and mushroom. And we counted them a couple of years ago as best we could. And the company that counted them said, we think there are as many as 2 million people who self-identify. It's not just us calling them that, but they self-identify as Hardys. Again, that's not us. We didn't do this. There's a nonprofit called Hardys International now, whose goal is to foster more content like When Calls the Heart. I see my friend Tim Mahoney back there, like his movies. Help that content go farther. And we coined a term for these people. We call them evangelists. They evangelize for us because they're fans of the show. And they do things like put the theme song, the opening theme song, as their ringtone on their phone. So when they're in the grocery store and their phone goes off, this weird song comes on, and people ask them about it, right? That's evangelism, guys. That's pure evangelism. We call it evangelism. So let me do the math for you. Our way, Michael and my way, the world's way to view this is we were trying to produce one movie in 2008, 2009. 4 years later, Hallmark was getting into the series business. Think about that. If we make the movie, it's one and done. But because we couldn't make the movie, because we were stopped from making the movie, and had to go through our own 40 days, 40 years in the wilderness, trying to figure out how to salvage our lives, God had a different plan. We wanted to finish a movie. What we really needed, we wanted to finish the movie. What we needed was to be faithful, not give up, and God provided a movement. Again, we're just the messengers. We didn't bring the movement. So let me give you the lessons that I learned that I hope can apply to you. As I said, hold on to what is true. If you're going through any life challenge, and they're all coming at us, all of us are going to have challenges pretty routinely in our lives. Hold on to what is true. My boys got me to reflect on the promises of God. Promises such as God always keeps his promises in Numbers and in Psalms. God created us and knows us, Psalm 139. God is always with us, Deuteronomy 31:8. God never forgets us, Isaiah 49. God watches over our lives and keeps us from harm, Psalm 121. God has plans to prosper us and to give us hope and a future, Jeremiah 29. God strengthens us and helps us, Isaiah 41. God fights for us. And that's in a bunch of books, right? Hold on to what is true. Don't believe the lies, the deceit swirling around you, what other people think, right? Hold on to what is true. Here's another one. Those who are called can never be uncalled. I thought I was. I thought I had been called to what I was doing, and then this getting, basically we got hit by a drunk driver. I mean, that's what happened. through no fault of our own. We got thrown this bundle of circumstances that was not our fault. So my pastor, when my boys, my posse, they went back and reported on me to my pastor, Rick Warren, at Saddleback Church, right? They started talking about in the staff, like, oh, Brian got hosed, it's like, and so Rick calls me just out of the blue, and he goes, I got 5 minutes, tell me what happened. So I gave him the 2-minute version of this talk, and he said, were you called to do this? And I said, I thought I was. And he said, no, whoa. There's no such thing as being uncalled. You don't get to unring the bell in your life. Another pastor pal quoted Tozer to me, A.W. Tozer, from the book, The Unusual Christian. I love this quote. If God sets out to make you an unusual Christian, and I think what he's talking about is one that's going to do something bold, who's called to do something like impactful in the world. By the way, we all are. I don't know if you knew that. Every one of you is called to do something impactful around you in the world. So here's what Tozer said. If God sets out to make you an unusual Christian, he is not likely to be gentle on you. A sculptor does not use a manicure set to turn the rude, unshapely marble into a thing of beauty. The saw, the hammer, and the chisel are cruel tools, but without them, the rough stone must remain forever formless and unbeautiful. Love this quote. To do his supreme work of grace within you, he will take from your heart everything you love most. Piles of ashes will lie where your most precious treasures used to be. This is not to teach the sanctifying power of poverty, but God knows the secret of removing things from our hearts while they still remain to us. He lets us have them, but teaches us not to let our hearts go out to them. Thus, they are useful without being harmful. Does that make sense? So you can't be uncalled. No such thing. Third lesson. Fourth lesson. Persistence beats resistance. There's also no such thing as giving up. Failure's not an option. If you've been called to do something, life's going to throw the whirlwind at you. The enemy doesn't want you to do it, right? God allows us to go through the whirlwind, but failure's not an option. It doesn't mean God's going to give it to you and do it for you exactly like you thought you were going to get it, right? In fact, likely not. He's not a vending machine. You don't put a coin in the machine and get the outcome you want. He loves us too much to give us everything we want. Instead, he gives us exactly what we need. Now, we can sit around and protest our circumstances, or we can think outside the box. In the book of Kings, when Elijah and the Israelites were wandering around the wilderness for 40 years, like stubborn knuckleheads, right? They didn't have to be out there for 40 years, right? They were just stubborn. They came to a brook that they had been to before. It had given them a source of water. They had even laid down memorial stones there to remember when they came back that this had been a place that God had provided for them. Well, guess what? When they got to the brook this time, anybody know the story? It was dried up. No water. So like most of us, we would sit on the ground and whine. Where's our water? We deserve water. This is not fair, right? So most of us do. But what did Elijah do? He said, no, we have to go find a new brook. So they got up and they went looking for a new brook. Guess what, guys? Our brook on When Calls the Heart was a Jewish man, not very faithful, by the way, who produced Dumb and Dumber. That was our brook. The most unlikely person God could ever use, and still very unlikely in our lives, but still our partner, and for 13 years has been supporting this vision. My fifth lesson for you is the journey is just as important as the destination. It's been 17 years since we fell apart in 2008. And we could have never anticipated the heartbreaking struggle that we went through, or the blessing that it has become now. We started out making a movie. When Calls the Heart is going into season 13. And it has we call a franchise or an engine to it that has tremendous potential for going much further. We have a spin-off show called When Hope Calls coming this Sunday on Great American Family, season 2 of When Hope Calls. It was literally a planted spin-off in When Calls the Heart. Has all the same virtues and values in it. Starts Sunday. There's 2 more potentially coming out of the When Calls the Heart storytelling universe, right? We're the micro Marvel at this point, I guess. God doesn't care as much about our franchises. Oh, by the way, who knows what show holds the record for the most seasons of television? Well, they're a couple years ahead of us. Yes. Who has it? MASH? No. You got it, buddy. I knew one of our younger attendees would have it. 42 seasons. 42 seasons, The Simpsons. Bart Simpson is still 13 after 42 years. The show was on before I even started working in film and television. So we got a long way to catch up with that, right? But if we make it to season 17, which you can all help us with, by the way, we will get into the top 10 of all time. But God doesn't care about that, right? He doesn't care about the franchises. He doesn't care as much about that as he cares about using us to be storytellers, to stir up soul cravings in people. Testimony always trumps trials. Me being able to share this story with you, my testimony of this overcoming event in our lives, it trumps all the bad stuff, right? Testimony trumps trials. Failure always precedes redemption. But success never begets redemption. You can't get to redemption from a starting place of success. You need to have a failure. The seed has to die when it's thrown into the soil before it produces the flower. It's the cross, right? It's the crucifixion. We have to go through some sort of crucifixion to get to the resurrection. The coda that I want to leave with you is we're doing it again. We're starting again, Michael and I, on a brand new show called Home to Harmony. We sold this show to Netflix because everybody said, the Hardys, what the heck? What have you done? We sold this to Netflix 4 years ago. For 2.5 years, we struggled with them to figure out what they wanted. We knew what we wanted to do. It's a show about a widowed pastor who returns to his boyhood town, who takes over Harmony Community Church. He brings his 2 kids. It's where he grew up, and he was a wannabe rock star back in the day. So everybody thinks he's a flake. He comes back to town, and it's fun, it's funny, it's poignant, but it's all about Pastor Sam Gardner. It's based on a series of books written by a pastor, Phil Goley, who wrote these books, fictional books, and Netflix had no clue what they wanted. They kept moving the goalposts on us. We wrote 3 different versions of the pilot. They had musical chairs with the executives, so a new executive stepped in. We had to resell that new executive because they didn't know what they were inheriting there. And finally, about a year ago, we said, guys, you need to let it go. We need to get it back from you. We had to buy it back because they had been paying for all of this. We had to buy it back, but we know there's a show there. And it has all the feels and vibes of When Calls the Heart and more. And it's contemporary. It's set today, but in a small town in Indiana. So we took it to Angel Studios. Who's seen The Chosen? Okay? Same thing that happened with The Chosen. It started out with Angel Studios, and now it's the biggest supernova in the world. Way bigger than When Calls the Heart ever became. So we're going to try to do that with Home to Harmony through Angel Studios. But failure was not an option for us. We believe the world needs this show. And based on our experience of When Calls the Heart, we know it. We know it in our bones. It's not about us. It's about us getting hope, faith, and love into the culture. So I want to end with a Teddy Roosevelt quote. Good way to end a spiritual time with a quote from an old president, dead president. I love this quote, though, from 1910. About the same time frame as When Calls the Heart. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how strong the man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes up short again and again, because there's no effort without error and shortcoming. But it's him who knows the great enthusiasms and spends himself in a worthy cause, who in the end knows the triumph of high achievement, and who, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. So that's my talk. Thank you guys for being here today.
Yeah, let's give Brian a hand. Thank you. I will give a couple of minutes for questions, give you a chance to just catch your breath here. Yes. I know some of you may need to go on the time here, but I know we've got a lot of Hardys here, and we're Minnesotans, so when Brian asks if you're a Hardy, we kind of go like this in Minnesota. We don't admit it sometimes, but there's a lot of Hardys here. And I do want to just acknowledge there are a lot of creatives here today, too. And so to our Twin Cities creatives, from Rob Barrett, who's cooking for Dad's show, propelled him to the Today Show, and got hit by a guy from The Sopranos and made a hit funny video to that, to Tim Mahoney back here, to Ann Pritchard, who is a phenomenal actress, and great to have you here today. And you can see her as the pie lady in Love for Horses, right? Yes, Joy of Horses right now. And I think of Marilyn, who I've watched in so many productions here over the years, but so grateful for our creatives here, and the fact that we've got some great storytellers here. And Brian, it's just been a joy to have you here today, and we'll make sure we get some of these other creatives up here too to tell their stories here in future months because they're inspiring. But I know several of you have some questions, and you want to know kind of the secrets or what's coming up or whatever. And so he's agreed to say what he can say today if you wanted to spill the beans on some of that stuff. But who's got a question? I'll bring it here. Rob, we'll start with you.
Thanks so much. So why don't more producers get it? Last night, this came up. We saw a thing of a new show by Larry David, co-producer of possibly the most successful TV show of all time, Seinfeld, which had no profanity, zero, and very little untoward subject. So we had this new show. We're going to watch it. It's called Louder Milk. We thought this would be great. Well, we didn't even make it through one. It's just F word, F word, F word, F word. You're like, okay, he knows how to make a successful show, the most successful show of all time. Why didn't he learn the lesson of that and do it again?
Yeah, it's a great question. Larry David also made Curb Your Enthusiasm, which was on HBO for 13 seasons. So it was as successful as Seinfeld, but was also filled with, lots of broken glass and razor blades. Jerry Seinfeld, the show is called Seinfeld, is a clean comedian. Now, he's not a believer, right? But he keeps his comedy clean. Well, he wasn't going to do a show full of F-bombs. That's not how Larry David lives. So Larry David gets to make his own shows now about the way he lives. So that would be my best example there. But, I think part of it is, God has the same love for all of us. He wants no man to perish. So all these incredible creative people that have this very different worldview than us, right? That's what they've grown up with. That's what they know. Again, out of the heart comes, right, forth out of the mouth. So hard hearts are going to give us hard content. I mean, that's the easiest way I can say that. That doesn't mean God loves them any less. In fact, he wants none of them to perish. And that old saying, we're just beggars who happen to find some bread, trying to tell the other people where the bread is, that's how I look at it. The line is right here. I'm not way over there. I'm right here next to the line, right? Maybe Mother Teresa was way over there. I don't know. But I'm over here, right next to the line. They're just right there. All those people. Larry David is right there. We need to share the bread. That's how I see it. So we need to dispel darkness with light. And the good news is it works. The hard part is getting people to, these hardened hearts to say yes to it, to put the money up, to give you the bandwidth on their platform, to broadcast those things. That's the hardest part, right? To convince those hard hearts. But they're leaving money on the table. That's what I always say. Ever since I went through this thing with One Calls the Heart, I'm very bold when I go into meetings. I just basically say, you need to do this. You're leaving money on the table. If you don't want to do it, God bless, but I'm going to invite you to the premiere party. You're going to get an invite when somebody else says yes, and you're going to be left out. So I'm fearless now. I had a widowmaker in my life, and I survived it. Now when I go into meetings, I just tell them what they need, and I'm bold about it. And they may say no to me, but I make sure they remember that they passed. And when we got Home to Harmony back from Netflix, they put schmuck insurance on it. Anybody know what that term is? Schmuck insurance in Hollywood is making sure that if something else that you passed on is a hit somewhere, that you have a piece. So Netflix gets a royalty if we make this thing a go, Home to Harmony a go with Angel Studios. They get a small royalty. But it's like somebody wants CYA money, if you know what that means. Right? They want a CYA excuse. So anyway, hope that answers your question. Oh.
Brian, can you speak to the money that was left hanging to your people in Canada and what happened?
Yes, thank you for asking that. That's part of the story that I left out. So by finishing the movie, right? By finishing the movie, we didn't walk away from the debt. Even though it wasn't our fault, we were able to finish the movie and get the $1 million in incentive. And we made pro rata deals with all the 83 of the people that were owed money. And we said, we won't touch it. You get your piece of that. And after 5 years or so, it was found money for them. So they all signed, right? And our names, I mean, we're making When Calls the Heart in Canada. So we got our name off all the S lists there. So anyway, thanks for asking that. But
All
that
right,
was
time for two more questions. So be bold, Hardys. This is your chance. Here we go.
So what advice would you give an up-and-coming writer, somebody who wants to get into the business? What training, education, opportunities could they?
Yeah. Here's what I always say. If you're called to do it, if you believe God is calling you to do it, then you have to, right? But what I add to that is you need to find 3 champions. And what I mean by that is you need to find people that are all scarred up. They're wounded warriors. They've been to the wars in your business, right? They come home missing limbs and eyes because they've been in the wars, but they're veterans who know the business. If they confirm it for you, right? And it can't be your Aunt Connie or your mom or your brother, because they love everything about you, right? They actually, the bar for praise is very low with family. When we get praise from our parents for taking a little duty in the toilet, that is a low bar, right? So mom and dad, brother and sister, Aunt Connie, they're biased. They're going to love everything about you. What you need to find is 3 wounded warriors who've been in the war to read your copy, read your material, and affirm in you that you're called. Because in the age of YouTube, everybody's called to be in the movie business. And there's a lot of people basically getting, 7 million views of pulling their pants down and scratching their rear end. I mean, that's nothing. That's not anything. But in the age of YouTube, everybody believes they can be a movie maker, a screenwriter, a director, whatever. So that's why I suggest 3 champions. I had 3 champions in my life who affirmed the only thing that I know how to do. They spotted it, and they affirmed it in me. And so I always say, find 3 champions who have earned the right to their opinion. And if they say, you must do this, then you actually have to. That's my rule, right? God is calling you, but he's also commissioning you to go into the world and take that craft, that beautiful craft, by the way, made in the image of the author of the universe. Writers are in the legacy. We're made in the image of the author of everything. That's what the Bible tells us. If that's true, then we're supposed to be, and we get it affirmed, and we believe we're called, we're supposed to become the Michelangelo of that category. Whatever your gift is, and we all have different gifts, but God has given you a gift, and he's the author of everything. So that's my best sort of big picture inspiration. But also find like-minded people in your area that you can network with. There's a lot of filmmakers, there's a lot of theater in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities. The Guthrie Theater's here. One of my partners used to write for Prairie Home Companion. There's a lot of good theater and good creative talent in the Twin Cities. You got to go to networking events. You got to meet people. It's the same everywhere. Networking is important. Networking is the key. Hope that helps.
All right, last question, Maria.
Thanks for coming out today. Quick question for you. So what made you go into the world of writing film and what drew you to the story of When Calls the Heart.
Okay. So I could spend an hour telling that story too, but I'll try to do it in 1 minute. I had a teacher in high school. When I talk about champions, having 3 champions, one of my champions was an English teacher when I was a freshman who held me after class. And I thought, I'm in trouble. What did I do, right? And the teacher, she brought me up to her desk, and all the other people are leaving, and my buddies are like looking at me with pity, like I'm in trouble. And she had an essay that I had written, and it had an A+ on it, and a few red marks here and there. But she said, she looked me right in the eye, and she said, I want you to know that you could do this for a living if you want to. I didn't know that. The writing was just slightly easier than everything else, which was a slog for me, right? I was a very average student. But the writing, there was a bit of a facility for that. And that lady, Mrs. Stevens, dogged me through high school. She was the one that got me on the school newspaper. She was the one that said, you got to go to journalism school. So I went to journalism school. I thought I was going to be a journalist, and I was. Graduated with a degree in journalism, and that morphed into what I'm doing now. So that's the first half. And Mrs. Stevens was one of my champions, one of my wounded warriors, right? So why When Calls the Heart? Well, Jeanette Oak, who's read Jeanette Oak books? A lot of people. She's beloved. Her publisher's based here. It was Bethany House, now it's Baker Books. Yeah. People loved her. 30 million books. Prairie romance. She was pretty much she pioneered prairie romance novels. Chaste romance. We knew that chaste romance was the ticket. We use an acronym for the content that we're trying to build. H for humor, E for emotion, R for romance. So that spells her. That kind of almost covers it. But we have one more letter, O, for optimism. What does that spell? It works, right? So that's what the show is. And we want to help people aspire to be better than they are, or to live for a greater purpose than they do. And we want an idealistic approach to community. We want to remind people of what community really can be. You guys all know community. You come to a great church. You know what community can be. Well, that's what Hope Valley is, right? They all go to the same church. There's one Jewish person there, but I'll go to the same church. So community is one of the stars of the show. And I hear from Hardys all the time, we wish we could live there. Not really. Nobody wants to go back to 1920 and take a shower or a bath once a week. I mean, it was a grubby time for people. It doesn't look very grubby on television. It's very idealized. But the sense of community, and we try to mine relevant ideas out of 1920 that still resonate today. So that when people go through challenges in 1920 in the show, they're kind of the same challenges that people are facing today. Trying to find universal themes that will attract everybody. There are some great Christian filmmakers. They're fantastic. A lot of what they're doing is sermons on film. My take is a little slightly different than that. If we as believers believe that we have the cure for everything, right? The cure for everything in the universe. We have the cure for that. We know what the cure is. If we had a cure for AIDS, why would we keep that under under a bushel, right? Why not show that light for everybody? Well, we do have a cure for AIDS. We have a cure for everything. We know what the cure is. That's a precious cargo. That's the power of the cross and salvation through Jesus is a very precious cargo that I believe needs to be hand-delivered. Dan, to me, that precious cargo needs to be given to me by somebody who loves me, not a picture on a wall. That makes it propaganda. And I've taken my unsaved friends to some of the more explicit Christian films. And they always turn to me and go, "Oh, I see why you brought me." That's not a good thing. That's propaganda, guys. My take on faith in film is stir up soul cravings that cause me to go to work, and then this guy is with me at the water cooler on Monday and says, "Hey, did you see that movie? What do you think about that?" Now we have a bridge, a real flesh and blood bridge to the content. So people look at us and go, "Oh, it's just light faith." Exactly. It's an appetizer for that everybody can watch. Nobody's turned off. People of no faith can watch. We've had Muslim fans of When Calls the Heart. They love the values. So that's my particular take, and I don't run down anybody who's doing good work and doing great work to bring people to Christ. I want to stir up soul cravings that can only be satisfied by this.
Let's give Brian a hand. Thank you for joining us today, Brian. And I want to thank all of you for coming out on a Thursday afternoon, kind of a miserable day outside, to come and spend some time here with Brian. And I hope that you heard what he said at the end there. You know, that their goal with a television show is to stir up soul cravings. And our goal here at Wooddale is to see you, as you live your life, stir up soul cravings too. Because just as great as the fictional TV show is, even greater than that is the fact that every one of you have a beautiful story. And every one of your stories is unique. And you've all faced things in your life that are challenges that nobody else in this room will ever face. And we can look at those challenges as being those things that have pushed us down, or we can look at those challenges as a way to be a blessing in the lives of others as we've overcome that. So we love stories at Wooddale. And we say that this is a place where your story's safe. This is a place where we want to help you learn how to tell your story in the lives of others, because we believe that every single human being that lives on the planet today was created by a God with infinite worth and value. And there's the possibility that you're here today and you're hearing about soul cravings and faith media, and you're like, "Yeah, that's not who I am. I'm here because I wanted to hear from a Hollywood producer or a TV star." And no matter if you believe what Brian believes and I believe, I just want you to hear that one thing today, that there's a God who didn't make a mistake when he created you. And he may still be writing your story, and faith may be like nowhere in the midst of that story right now. But if that's something you want to explore, or you want to ask the tough questions, why did God let me go through the really difficult times? I spent an hour today with somebody who was talking to me about her son dying and saying, "Why would God let that happen?" Those are hard questions. But those are real questions. Those are the kind of questions that people ask day by day. And so our stories are all unique. Our stories all carry pain. Our stories all, though, are in light of eternity, something that is a beautiful thing. And so we'd love to hear your beautiful story here. So if you're new and we just haven't had the chance to meet, Dan and I and our team would just love to get to know your story, okay? God bless you. Have a great week. And send all your sports card fans here next week, because a very different week. We'd love to have it. If you want a picture with Brian afterwards, you want to meet him, you go right ahead.